Good morning. Welcome and thank you all for joining us this morning. I apologize for being a couple minutes late. We still have some attendees coming in, so if you can just be patient for a couple more minutes, we will get started in just a moment. Okay, well, we are thrilled to have so many folks registered today, so please give it a moment as everyone continues to join. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, welcome. Thank you for coming and happy Bike to Work Week. Can we switch to the next slide? There we go. Thank you. Typically, Bike to Work is normally a day, and it's recognized across the US in May and celebrates bicycling as a healthy commuting option that promotes awareness of bicycling and bicycle safety. Now it's only Tuesday, so if you're coming into the office or you just have a free t-shirt, there's still time to register, show your support, and claim your free t-shirt at biketoworkmd.com. So for those of you who may not know me, my name is Jessica Honeycutt and I manage the business development team here at DPOB. The idea for today is to discuss how the micro-mobility industry has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and how it can be used to reopen our cities and get our employees back to work. I'm very excited to be joined by local industry experts who think they have some of these answers. As we're going through the webinar, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and we will get to them after the presentations. Now I'd like to introduce you to our partners for today. We have Liz Cornish from Bikemore and Alex Davis from Spin. Thank you both very much for being here and all of the work that you do for Baltimore. First up today is Liz. Liz is the Executive Director of Bikemore, a nonprofit organization that advocates for bicycle policies and infrastructure that put people before cars and supports a healthy and thriving city. Again, thanks for being here today, Liz, and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. Downtown Partnership has always been a wonderful partner when we're talking about active transportation and economic development downtown, and so how they work together. So thank you for having me. And I think this is a really important conversation to have, especially at this moment. And so essentially what I think I'm going to do today is sort of go through, there's sort of two big topics, right? There is what to do with active transit or public transit during a pandemic. And then there's, when we think about when we return to work, when the economy starts to pick up, when we think about what is the workforce going to look like post-pandemic, there are some general things that businesses can start investing in now that are going to set you and your employees up for success. All right, next slide. So essentially, when we talk today, we're going to talk about why bikes and why scooters, and kind of when we talk about these two things together, we say micromobility. I think that's the best word that we've come up with. It doesn't mean it's great, but it's the one I'm going to go with now for sake. Go ahead and next slide.
That one's hard for me to say, at least when I'm nervous and trying to say it on this webinar today.
So as we're thinking about the pandemic, here's some things that you need to consider when planning for active and public transportation. So the reality is that transit is intersecting with public health. People are afraid to take transit. And in fact, in the beginning, when we were entering the first stage, as Governor Hogan was announcing, initially his plan was to totally take transit offline. And so luckily advocates like Bikemore were able to step up to the plate and be like, no. There are a lot of essential workers that rely on transit. And so while we might have to rethink operations, we definitely have to view transit as essential. So knowing that people are afraid of transit, And then we also know that federal and state funding is like evaporating. So right now, the MTA has proposed severe winter service cuts that are going to see so many buses removed, total bus routes, other routes will be truncated, routes will become less frequent. And so right now, one of our big advocacy projects is to work with business owners, is to work with other advocacy organizations, is that we still have time to advocate for those changes to either be less harmful or maybe even come back altogether, because these changes are going to be permanent. And so just imagine our underperforming transit system now, and then imagine what happens if you eliminate 30% of bus routes. And so when we're thinking about, even in the CARES Act funding, we're starting to see some debate about where federal funding is going and how is it supporting transit. And there really isn't a whole lot of momentum even on the federal level. And so that's where some of our advocacy is directed as well. And so then we're looking at what's happening on the city level. We're running out of money. We just had to do a budget approval that dipped into our rainy day fund and took $25 million out. So, you know, these are some other considerations, right? Office buildings are changing. When you say I'm going to work today, where does that mean? You know, so when we're thinking about my commute, what does that mean? And then we think about housing development. So, you know, we're not only removing people from the places they used to go, but the places that they live now. And so all of that's going to be changing how we think about commuting. And so micromobility, bikes and scooters have a whole lot of room to grow in terms of innovation and ridership for sure. So we really have to look at, when we're looking at the mix of how are we going to move people, what does commute mean? We have to start thinking about bikes and scooters maybe more seriously. Next slide. So one of the things that I always like to point out, because a lot of people are like, no, I could never give up my car, you know, that's just impossible. But the reality is that there's a lot of advantages to it. The first is cost to own. So on average, an American spends about $8,000 a year owning and maintaining a car. So that's car notes, that's insurance, that's maintenance. Whereas the cost to maintain a bike over the course of a year, $300. And you can probably buy, I know you can buy a high quality used bike for around the same cost. So you're looking at something that can be repaired, and then you're only going to spend $300 a year maintaining it. It's flexible and reliable. I see this a lot with our workforce development partners. You have a client, you graduate them from the program. Let's say you invested on average $15,000 in the case management and skill development that you're providing this person. In most workforce development programs in the city, I ask, well, what do you do about transportation? And they say, we give them an MTA pass. And then we know that our transit system is underperforming. We're setting people up for failure because we're putting people that are entering into the workforce, specifically out of these programs, into the type of jobs where if you're late more than once, if you miss a shift, you're fired. And so now what does that do to all of the work that we've invested in them? Now they have a black mark on their resume, and it makes it even more difficult to get work. So when we develop a city for active transportation, when I leave for work on my bike, I know exactly what time I'm going to get there, and I'm in charge of when I leave. And so that in and of itself, I think makes the case for why we need to invest in things that allows biking to be accessible to more people. The other thing is schedule. Even if we had a decent performing transit system, we have a lot of essential workers right now, and a lot of job sectors that are still growing that are third shift. So you're looking at people that have to get to work late at night and have to come home early in the morning when transit just isn't available. And these are a lot of entry-level workers that sort of fit the Baltimore dynamic of 30% of Baltimore residents lack access to a vehicle. And that number can climb as high as 60% in formerly red line neighborhoods. So we have to consider that this workforce and economic development piece again, if we want people to stay employed, we have to provide them with adequate transportation. And so we need to provide them with reliable transportation. Bikes aren't going to solve everyone's transportation problem, but it can create a mode shift. So we start to see pressure relieved on the solutions that we need to provide other people that maybe biking isn't a good fit. It also helps close the health disparities that relate to COVID. So, you know, when we think about the people that are most vulnerable and that will continue to be vulnerable to pandemics and viruses that will inevitably happen over time, we need to get serious about how do we improve health. So if you have a heart condition, if you have something like asthma, all of this stuff is related to physical fitness. And so if we can provide little opportunities for people to increase physical fitness throughout their everyday life, we then remove their vulnerability to things like COVID-19. And the other kind of pitch for two wheels is the transportation sector is now the #1 cause of carbon emissions. It surpassed the smokestacks, right? And so when we think about the urgency of climate change, the fastest way that we can get there is to invest in ways for people to get around that aren't things that, that emit carbon emissions. So we're talking about changing the trucking industry, we're talking about changing airlines, but we're also talking about changing cities. And this is something that we control, especially in Baltimore. Baltimore City is unique in that even though we don't have control of our transit system, we control the roads. So street design is something that's completely within our power to do. All right, next slide. So I talked about, when people say, well, cars aren't for me, I could never use that. And so I think, we have to think about the barriers because those are essential to start thinking about solutions, right? And so when we talk about safety, that means a whole lot of different things. So that can mean from cars, like I'm riding my bike and I feel safer in a designated space on the street. But if you don't build that designated space on the street, I'm not going to bike. That can mean from crime. So especially going back to that third shift or when daylight savings happens, like if I'm a woman and I'm biking alone, I'm going to be very careful about how I, plan my route. I think that happens for men too. I mean, this is, and so then you really have to think about how we're planning routes. This was a conversation we had with Johns Hopkins. There was some crime that was happening from a lot of the doctors and nurses and healthcare workers that use bikes to get back. But because there wasn't a safe east-west bike facility from the hospital, they were sort of going all in the neighborhoods where streets were slower. And we were starting to see things like assaults increase. So they became one of our best advocates for the Monument Street and Center Street bike lane, because at that moment, you create more people using the same route. They're all funneled in the same place. And so that creates a sense of safety, just that safety in numbers. And if Hopkins wanted to invest security resources, now they have a single corridor where they can do it. A lot of times, we think about workplace and community culture. So there is a wide spectrum of what is acceptable. These are intersections of race. These are intersections of gender. These are intersects with economic class. And so we have to really think as employers, what are we doing to make our workplace as inclusive and comfortable as possible for people to start to take active transportation? And so one of the ways that I describe this is when I lived in Arlington, I worked in DC, and I was very fortunate that in South Arlington, I took basically trails the entire way into DC. So my commute was 10 miles, but it was pretty low stress. However, in my neighborhood, I lived really close to a workforce development center. So as I was heading into my job on K Street, then we had a lot of Latino men that were heading in the opposite direction to the workforce development center. And so while I would get roses thrown at my feet for how environmentally conscious I was or how healthy I was, these other men were not getting that same support in their community. And so you really have to understand that to choose active transportation does not always come with this benefit of being seen as this, virtuous person. And so what can we do to increase the dignity of choosing to do micromobility? All right, next slide. Sorry, I'm just reading my notes, and I think I wrote it at a certain time where I said, it costs a lot to live in dystopia. So, So, we're going to see increased cost of living. We already see it, right? Food prices, cost of rent. All of these things are only going to increase as our world around us changes, as our economy changes. And so we have to think very clearly about how are we making choices as employers that improve the bottom line for our employees? How are we eliminating some of the costs that they have? And so, climate change, it's expensive. So how can we figure out how to counteract that? It's very small type, so I'm like, and then car culture is really expensive. So you have to spend, maintenance on roads, and have to maintain infrastructure. When you are designing for car culture, and you're building more pavement, you're eliminating a city's ability to plan for stormwater mitigation. So all of these investment in active transportation infrastructure, whether it's bike lanes on the street or bike trails throughout the city, those are significantly cost less to maintain. And that means more tax dollars in the coffers, including our rainy day fund. And then it also connects to fewer people want to live here. I hear very often from the CEOs of some of our major employers that if they have offices here in Baltimore, but they also have offices here in Austin, their young workforce are picking Austin. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the main ones that they hear is that people don't want to have to own a car. And so they want to live somewhere where they can easily walk and bike to work. And so as employers, we need to be advocates that are showing up in those spaces to say, I need a workforce to be here and to stay here. And that means that even though my personal choice for the last 40 years has been driving to work, and that seems realistic and comfortable, that's not realistic, comfortable, or frankly, what people want to choose. And so there's really interesting ways that you can also impact costs. So one of the things I talk about is parking. So developers, when we have things like parking minimums, it means that each time you build a building and you have an apartment or you have an office building, you have to build X amount of parking spaces. Now, cities like Buffalo, New York eliminated those. And what that does is it improves the bottom line on those developments. The example that I will give is Remington Row. There was a desire to do things like green roofs and all of this sustainable infrastructure, but because of parking minimums, they had to build a lot of garage spaces. Each garage space, especially underground, costs about $30,000 per space to construct. And so when you multiply the parking structures that we have to build to meet those parking minimums when we're designing and building new buildings, we are giving away real estate that could be rent to our tenants, whether it's office or our tenants if we're building apartments. And so we have to think as developers, like, what do we want our margins to be? And then from this idea of it's going to cost more, if I don't build parking, which there are apartments that are doing this, Wheelhouse Collaborative is a really good example, and they're not having any trouble getting tenants. When you do that, you can actually drop rent. And so you can still make the margin that you need to make without offering those 2 parking spaces that cost you $60,000 to build. Does that make sense? Like, the margins change, and so now you can lower rent, and now all of a sudden you're building affordable housing, which also meets a lot of requirements that developers have in the city that are sometimes really difficult to meet and create tension between affordable housing advocates and commercial developers. We do not need to be in opposition with one another. There are immensely easy policy decisions that we can make that eliminate that challenge altogether. All right, next slide. All right, so when we think about short-term solutions, let's just talk about some really easy stuff. Let's create a bike-friendly workplace. So that's stuff like showers. That's stuff like relaxed dress code. Let's talk about incentives. So you can do what's called a parking cash out. This is actually something that city agencies are now required to do, which means that if I work for Morgan Stanley and part of my package is that I get a free parking space, that parking space has a real cash value. Otherwise, I would spend maybe upwards of $200 a month paying for a parking space if I didn't get one provided for free. Now, if you allow employees to cash out $200 a month to not bring a car on your property, all of a sudden you have to build and maintain a lot less parking. And I trust trust that a lot of people, especially those entering the workforce, will gladly take an extra $200 a month not to bring a car to work. You can also get a lot of reductions in your health insurance that you're working with if you include things like health and wellness. And so when you talk about, it's very easy to build in that health and wellness program. Do you take active transportation to work? People can say yes, and all of a sudden their premiums drop, and that means the premiums for your entire company go down. So I definitely, if you aren't already doing it, I know tons of companies do, but if you aren't already doing it, talk to your insurance carrier, because that's a really great way to incentivize people to bike to work, because again, they're lowering their monthly cost, and it lowers your bottom line as well. All right. And then the other last thing I'll say about development is sort of going back to that affordable housing thing. The other thing that allows you to do when we lobby for things like the elimination of parking minimums is it makes historic renovation much more attractive. So we know that there's a lot of tax credits that are available to us when we do historic renovation, which already makes it attractive. But a lot of the barriers is they're like, I can't figure out parking. Like, it's too expensive to do it. So it's expensive to renovate some of the historic buildings that have been allowed to just lay there uninhabited for so many years. That costs a lot of money. But if you want to incentivize that, which I think this is what we're talking about when we talk about character of a neighborhood and density, and bringing back some of our beautiful neighborhoods that have been kind of left untouched for so many years. Eliminating parking minimums all of a sudden makes historic preservation and renovation a lot more attractive. Next slide. And so, you know, we talked about the policy initiatives that are happening now and things that we need so much support. And so I encourage you, if you are just hearing about the MTA cuts happening for the first time, please follow up with an email. We are building a really strong coalition to fight Governor Hogan and these cuts. MTA has done the best that they can given the limited resources that they were given, but it is possible to turn this around, but we need a powerful lobby. And what better powerful lobby than some of the businesses that are affinities with Downtown, with Downtown Partnership. And then I wanted to also direct you to the Complete Streets Manual. This was some legislation that we spearheaded that was passed in December of 2018. And it basically said agencies have to work together to incentivize designing streets that make sense for all travel. And so now one of the big things was we have to create a manual so that if you tear up a street, it has to come back in this specific way. And so the manual is now open for public comment. And so there's a lot of opportunity for people to weigh in, to read the manual, to think about how it's going to impact their employees, or maybe if you're a developer, how it might impact economic development projects that you're involved in. So I definitely encourage you, that's very easy to access on the Baltimore City DOT website. Or again, if you just want to reach out to me, I can make sure you get a copy and certainly walk you through the manual to point out different areas that might be beneficial for you to weigh in. And then last slide. Okay, well, the last one on my slide is just my contact information, but I bet that's coming at the end, so I'm not super worried about that. So thank you for your time. Yeah, and we'll move on.
Thank you, Liz. Yes, your contact information is at the end, and I will also include it on the follow-up email that you will receive after the webinar, as well as links to those, to the handbook and to the coalition that you guys are forming. Thank you again for all of the work that you do. And I know that I personally have several questions that I want to answer right now, but I am going to do what I said I was going to do and move along to Alex. Next up, like I just said, we have Alex Davis from SPIN. Alex is the Community Partnerships Associate for Baltimore. SPIN partners with cities, campuses, community groups, and businesses to provide dockless scooters throughout the United States. Like Bikemore, SPIN is committed to making our streets safe, livable, and just for everyone. And Alex, I will pass it off to you to tell us more.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. And thank you and special shout out to Downtown Partnerships for inviting us to this webinar today. And thank the audience today for taking time out of your busy schedule to hear me speak. So I am going to be touching on our new program, Spin Pass for Business. But before I touch on Spin Pass for Business, I'm just going to give you a slight overview of the Spin organization, our mission for those that are unfamiliar or need a refresher. So could you go to the next slide, please? So as I said, I'm going to give a brief introduction to Spin and our overall mission, our time in Baltimore, and then break into great detail about the Spin Pass for Business program. And then we'll have a discussion about next steps for those that are interested in the program. And I'll answer any questions from members in the audience. Next slide. So Spin's mission is to essentially give people the freedom to move. We want to bring people and their communities closer to the urban environment and resources. And Spin finds that this is especially essential, especially during the pandemic, as various forms of essential transportation have been limited as a result of the negative effects of COVID-19. Next slide. So while operating in Baltimore, we have operated in Baltimore for over a year and a half now. And in the year and a half that we've been operated in Baltimore, we've amassed a fleet size of over 1,400 scooters that operate 24/7. They are normally $1 to unlock and 29 cents per minute thereafter. And along with just operating in Baltimore, we have programs in safety and equity that we have in Baltimore as well. Next slide, please. So one of the programs that we've recently developed is the Spin Pass for Business program. And before I get more into the details about Spin Pass for Business, I want to give you all some insight into the inception of Spin Pass for Business and how it essentially came to be. So before Spin Pass for Business was created, we created what is known as the Everyday Heroes program with the adverse effects of COVID-19, creating transit gaps and adversely affecting public transit lines. We wanted to find a way to support the residents of the regions in which we work. And so what we did is develop the Everyday Heroes program. The Everyday Heroes program provides free 30-minute rides and free helmets to medical providers and their staff. And the program operated from March of this year to June. And it was a great success. There were a lot of staff from the medical providers that found great use for Spin scooters, especially during this time. And what that caused us to do is sort of reshift our thinking in terms of how we're supporting individuals that are essential workers. And in sort of gleaning on the successes, we found that Baltimore was one of the primary areas in which we had great success. So it was a little over 350 riders that have signed up for the Everyday Heroes program. 25% of active users and 1/3 of trips occurring happened in Baltimore. So it was an excellent opportunity for Spin to sort of repivot and ask ourselves, well, how can we further assist essential workers that are looking to move to and from their places of work in a safe manner? And also, how can we provide a blueprint and some basic guidelines for employers that are thinking of utilizing scooters to get their employees back to work safely? Next slide. So, as I said in the previous slide, COVID-19 has had some very adverse effects on the nation and in cities particularly, because it has really hit public transit. So whether it deals with cuts to bus lines that are serving communities where essential workers live, whether there are increases in times and making workers late to their designated places of work, or whether it is just the removing of lines permanently as a result of the lines not functioning as they normally would post-COVID. And so as a result of all of these various changes, cities and leaders began to ask the question of, how do we reevaluate micromobility? How do we go about providing the essential worker with essential modes of transportation and creating points of travel for essential transportation or for essential travel. And so with the impacts that have occurred during COVID-19, SPIN is working with these city leaders and looking at ways of supporting employers by finding a means of getting their employees back to work safely, and in examining the variety of effects that COVID-19 has had as employees are going through the various shifts that cities are going through as they're reopening. They may not feel comfortable getting back on public transportation. And so we want to provide an alternative form of transportation in which we can have essential workers get to and from work safely. So in regions like San Francisco and Detroit, we have been deemed essential transportation modes. And so we want to continually do our due diligence to support the essential worker. Next slide. So as I was speaking on the previous slide, safety has now become a huge thing, specifically with COVID-19. And SPIN has implemented strict sanitation policies so riders can feel confident in getting on a SPIN scooter. So we have strict sanitization policies that have been implemented by the CDC and the WHO. And some of those policies that we are dealing with, that we have implemented in our organization, deal with ensuring that scooters that are coming in and out of the warehouse are cleaned and ensure that vans that are delivering the scooters to deployment locations once they're finished with shifts, that they are thoroughly being cleaned as well. Operations are provided with a variety of PPE equipment to ensure that they're safe when cleaning the SPIN equipment. And then they're also adhering to 6 feet apart mandates to ensure that there is limited opportunity for transmission. And once again, really ensuring that the rider is confident in choosing SPIN as an option when looking to go to and from work. Next slide. So as cities are beginning to reopen and reevaluate their thought process around micromobility, SPIN is in a unique position to be essential transportation option. And so in being a essential transportation option, we have developed the SPIN Pass for Business program. And the SPIN Pass for Business program is a monthly subscription option, which we provide to employers that can purchase on behalf of their employees so they're able to get to and from work safely. So with the SPIN Pass for Business program, while it isn't designated or under commuter transit benefits, we find that it makes it a lot more flexible, as if there are specific circumstances like inclement weather and you find that the individuals that have signed up for the SPIN Pass for Business program aren't riding because of inclement weather, that is something that we can be flexible with and provide a means of a means of moving around on the behalf of the employer and the employee. So in this new normal, we want to ensure that this is a flexible transportation benefit that all employees are able to use. Next slide. So as I said, we want to be as flexible as possible in providing SPIN Pass for Business. And from most of the presentation, I spoke on the commute to and from work, but I also want to emphasize strongly that there are no limitations really on the type of trip that the employee can utilize SPIN Pass for Business. So if you're looking at the slide, there are 2 graphs. So these graphs are the learnings that we have gained from Everyday Heroes. They focused on the specific times in which riders were utilizing our scooters. And then it focuses on that second graph, how they used our scooters. So as I was previously saying, we want to ensure that with SPIN Pass for Business, that employees have access to the full gamut of opportunities in which they can use SPIN scooters. So if it is to commute to and from work, that's great. If you want to utilize the scooter in recreational activities, that is also great. So it's something that we want to make optionable, make an option to individuals that are either working from the office or they're working from home and they're looking to run an errand and delivering their mail to the mailbox. Next slide. So once there has been an evaluation and the contract is executed by the necessary parties, there are 3 easy steps to sign up for the program. So one, what would occur is SPIN would provide the HR department of your organization with a survey. And in the survey, eligible employees would fill out the survey with their email, their names, their telephone numbers. Once the HR department has received all this information, they would then provide this information to us. And we would then we would then activate the SPIN passes and provide that information to the employees that have signed up for SPIN Pass for Business. Next slide. So in short, that is my presentation. If there are any questions or concerns, I would be happy to take them at this moment.
Thank you, Alex. We definitely have some questions that people submitted throughout the presentation. And again, I will include all this contact information in the follow-up email to everyone that has registered. So let's just go ahead and start at the beginning. The first question that came in is, my employer subsidizes parking, but not MTA passes. My employer told me not to take MTA or Charm City Circulator, my only transportation options to and from work, and told me to take Uber or Lyft, but will not reimburse. What do I do? Ubers and Lyfts are not in my budget. Do either of you have a recommendation?
Okay, so to clarify, the employer will pay for a parking space, but they won't pay for an MTA pass.
Correct.
And so they told their carless employee just to take Uber or Lyft.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you do? I think it depends on how you want to make this decision. So if you want to make a personal choice to eliminate this, obviously biking, walking, scootering, like these are all options that there are communities that can help you started to like learn to make that choice. There's a lot of really great Facebook groups that if you're like, okay, I have no idea where to begin. Making friends online, people are really excited to teach you how to, convert your commute into active transportation. If you actually just want to push back on that decision, there's a lot of federal incentives out there that actually remove some of the bottom line cost to the employer. And so I'm happy to sort of lay that out for you. So that's something that you can take to your employer. And then, the activist in me says organize. You aren't the only one that's probably dealing with this in your company. And so start to ask around and just be like, hey, how are you getting to work? And like, what are some of your barriers? I'm not sure why your employer would tell you not to take the bus. I know there's some risk during a pandemic and that it's not super reliable. But pre-pandemic, there were tons of people that relied on the bus. And it can be effective if you plan your route appropriately. And so for an employer in Baltimore City to write off public transit is very concerning to me. So I would love to know who that is.
It's to me as well. And there's also the transit app that tracks them. Sometimes it's a little bit off, but it really does a great job. I've been taking the bus recently and there's a lot of people on it. It's busy. So definitely an effective mode of transportation. And then we also have scooters and subscription programs, which are much cheaper than Lyfts and Ubers and parking. Okay, thank you guys. Moving on to the next question. Once my company's remote employees start traveling back to Baltimore, we will be very interested in the SPIN program for travel between hotels and the office. Will SPIN be readily available near downtown hotels and the biopark?
So we work with our operations team. I am essentially a liaison that speaks with operations that is on the ground in Baltimore. So if there is a specific location that they are looking to have scooters deployed. That's a conversation that can definitely be had with operations, specifically if you are looking for Spin Pass for Business as an option for your employees. And we can make that opportunity happen for those that are looking to find scooters that are near their hotels.
Great. And I'll just add that DOT has a whole position that's focused on micromobility that works with the companies directly, specifically operations on the ground. Part of the agreements that scooter companies have with the city of Baltimore is a certain amount of scooters have to be on the ground at any given time. And they have specific, the scooter companies share API or GIS information, and that's how Baltimore City DOT holds the scooter companies accountable. And Spin has done a really great job of making sure not only that the quantity that makes sense for where people are looking for scooters makes sense, but also that they're equitably distributed throughout the city.
And then I'm going to kind of spin off of this one. It's a question that I had. So it sounds like you guys do a really good job of, communicating with employers and your employees for sanitation purposes right now during COVID, but is there any thing that gets pushed back on the rider, like wiping it down after you're done with it? Or is there any communication between Spin and the rider, I guess is what I'm trying to ask on a daily basis right now for clean and health purposes?
Yeah, so for
and I apologize if I missed it.
Oh, no, it's perfectly fine. For individuals that are looking to ride Spin scooters, we do have, like I said, our own set of regulations in which we're keeping the scooter clean. But also in our app at the height of COVID there, and still now, there's information that we provide to them in terms of social distancing. Yes, it's a single yes, it is a single use scooter where there is like you're riding the scooter by yourself, but we also encourage individuals that are riding to have hand sanitization and use the hand sanitizers before and after when being on the Spin scooters, and then abide by that 6-foot rule.
That makes sense. Another question that came in is, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. So historically, it sounds like biking and walking has gained interest during times of struggle. So what we're wondering is, I think Spin, you've seen the ridership go up, like you said, and we all know that you can't get a bike anywhere because of this pandemic. Do you think that once everything starts to go back to normal and the resources are there, people are going to lose interest? And if so, is there anything that we can do to keep the interest and as opposed to just going back to parking like we were before?
Alex, if you want to go first, but I'm happy to weigh in.
In terms of how cities have been reevaluating micromobility, I think it is something that's here to stay, specifically because at the end of the day, individuals want to, if you're in a city like DC, or if you're in a city like Baltimore, there's more of a encouragement to look for bikes. There's more of encouragement to look for scooters, because areas like DC are becoming parking lots where it's more car heavy, and it is sort of creating all of these safety problems for individuals that may be on scooters or bikes. And that's not to say don't be in a car, but at the end of the day, I would say that the direction in which cities are growing very much encourage people to continually seek out scooters and bikes, and encourage them to look for alternative forms of transportation when traveling, because it has been proven that, when you are utilizing a bike, you are one, getting that exercise, and then two, being able to control the commute and how you get to your place of work in a timely manner. And with scooters, it can be the same thing, whether it is fulfilling that first mile of the trip to the location that you're looking to go, or when you're coming back from home and you're looking to fulfill that last mile portion of the trip. So I think these are things that are here to stay in the long run, pandemic still going or no.
Yes, no, definitely they're going to stay. And, you know, hopefully things like parklets can stay as well. Liz, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, so, you know, when we look at the map of scooters, definitely like the hot spot is Johns Hopkins Hospital. And so that is a change. And so you're starting to see people easily opt in. We've certainly seen an increase in biking. It really has just exploded, both from a recreational standpoint and a transportation standpoint. Will those levels be maintained? I think so. I think as people experience that, like that's what they experience. Like, okay, it's really reliable and it's not so bad to bike in the cold. And now I can just, you know, be on my own schedule and not have to worry about, I know a lot of doctors and nurses that rely on their partners. They're a one-car family and they're like relying on their partners to come back and forth to get them as hospital shifts like are extending and becoming less, you know, regular. I think these are things that like active transportation can easily address. And so it's really convenient. Once you get over that sort of steep learning curve, you know, I say it's short but steep. So once you do it a few times, you're like, actually, this is really convenient and easy. So it is this opportunity that as we've seen riding explode, that then it really can be up to the city and employers to be like, okay, well, how can I be part of maintaining this momentum as well? And that kind of goes back to the things that I talked about to make a friendly workplace.
And it's so much fun. Way more fun than driving. I had something there, but I lost it. A question that came in, someone is super interested in biking or scootering to work, but isn't sure of the best routes. Is there somewhere online that they can go to generate a route that shows where there's bike lanes or shared streets?
Yeah, so I always point people to Google Maps first. So if you pull up Google Maps on your computer or phone, you'll see cars first, then you'll see transit, and then you'll see bikes. So if you click on the biking directions, it's constantly being updated. And so you'll see the little green routes that have to do with what we would call low stress routes or existing protected infrastructure. So that's a really easy way. And then you can also rely on the online community. People are also really helpful. They're like, hey, I live here and I work here. What would be the best route? Or, hey, I want to get to this event and I live here. What would be the best route? And so really that's, you know, I always say bike people are the best people. And so that idea of becoming part of that community, people are so excited. So they will support you that way. So I think that's the easiest, is just using Google Maps.
Awesome, thank you. In terms of biking and parking, is there an opportunity for, I know that our economic development team is able to assist people in getting bike racks installed close to their office or building. Is that something that you guys are able to assist with, whether it's a safe place to park your scooter or a safe place to lock up your bike?
Yeah, so the city has a formal program where you can actually request a city rack. But I would say that the wait time on that is pretty significant because the demand has been so high that it's just hard to keep, especially now. There's just so much manufacturing and shipping delays happening across all sectors. So that includes bike racks. But I will say the biggest way to incentivize people biking to work or even scooting to work, safe, secure indoor parking. And so once you do that, you know, like we have in my co-working space, they hung up bike racks and even on a rainy day, they were full. So I think that that's just a huge way to incentivize, because people are like, really, I'm going to leave my bike on the street for 8 hours without me checking on it. Bike racks are really great for short trips, like I'm running into the store, but it really needs to be indoor secure parking to create that shift.
Definitely. Well, I think that is it for the questions that we have. If anybody wants to try and get anything else in quickly, I can just give you 1 second. And as we are finishing up, I just want to say thank you again to our panelists for joining us today. This is a very important topic, and as a Baltimore City resident, and like I mentioned before, I am very enthusiastic about it because I am a pedestrian, biker, scooter, bus rider, whatever flavor of the day it is, really. And then before I let you guys go, I just wanted to give you a couple updates on what's going on downtown. So we are continuing to help restaurants turn parking spots into outdoor dining spaces all over the city. Just last week, O'Shea's, actually this was 2 weeks ago, O'Shea's, Soda Sopra, Hotel Revival, Topside debuted, sorry, I thought a question came in, new parklets for outdoor seating. We also have free yoga that takes place on Wednesdays in Center Plaza from 6 to 7 p.m. Live music is hosted in Center Plaza as well on Fridays from 5 to 7. And we have one of my favorite events, Barks and Booze, which is a small pop-up event with free beer and dogs. So, I mean, what else can you ask for? That's in Lower Preston Gardens every Thursday from 4 to 6. And then last but certainly not least, we have our virtual Black Business Friday. That's this week, this Friday, 3 days from now, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Again, it's virtual, so you will have to register online. We'll be showcasing local Baltimore Black businesses, featuring live performances, interviews, and you can get more information for that and register at godowntownbaltimore.com. And we hope to see you there. And then just again, following up, we ask that you like our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter pages to stay up to date on everything. All right, well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. And I dropped my contact information in the comments or in the chat if anybody wants to reach out. So yeah, I look forward to helping any employer or any employee figure out active transportation options.
Thank you both. And again, I will include that contact information in the follow-up email that you will receive after the webinar.
And also thank you everyone for attending this morning. Very much reach out if you are interested in the Spin Pass for Business program, but also reach out. We do a number of programs that we provide to the Baltimore area. Spin Access and Spin Safe Digital is one that we have in order to educate individuals of the Baltimore area on safety or scooter safety. So if there is anyone that is interested in other programming with Spin, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thanks for having us. This was great.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.